the party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to set it out.
But hey, everybody, my name is Andre Walton, the Southeast Regional Organizer for OWR, and I'm sitting here with Will Walter. He's a member of OWR and a pretty big supporter of progressive policies. So right now we're basically just having a chat about basically everything progressive politics. And so, yeah, you want to introduce yourself, Mike, or Will?
So my name's William Walter. I was elected as a Bernie delegate to represent the 5th CD of Wisconsin. I'm a big proponent of young people making sure their voices are heard, especially in such a, the world is changing very fast as technology advances. A lot of the older generations don't necessarily adapt as well, and a struggle as old as time. Older people hate the younger people. Not really hate, but they look down on what the younger people are doing that's different because they're so accustomed to their way of doing things. And then the younger people are looking up at the older people and we're like, what are you doing? How could you get to this point? So, now millennials have become the largest voting bloc in America. We could elicit real change if we were able to all get to the polls, but we struggle to do that. To be fair, it's kind of by design. There's a lot of implementations of the system that make it difficult for young people, people of color, people in more poverty-stricken areas, to make it more difficult for them to get to the polls and make their voices heard. But I really think if America wants to come back to our stance as the leader of the free world, the kings of democracy or whatever we've been calling ourselves for 50 years, where we're the best country in the world, it really we're not right now, frankly, and we could be. We just have a lot of pretty big steps that we need to take, and OWR is trying to fight that battle. We got to do something. You can't just sit around and take it, or nothing will change. Power is never freely given. It has to be taken.
Yeah, you're right there. And I feel like with that being said, we're mostly holding ourselves back. And obviously it has a lot to do with, in my opinion, money and politics. But we'll get to that. But the nice thing about you is we went to the same college and didn't get a chance to meet each other. But that's
didn't even know it. Yeah,
exactly.
And it's not like it's that big a school. It's
exactly Whitewater is a small school, but hey, it happens. But one of the interesting things about you is that you're a Bernie delegate, and obviously with the DNC coming out with their platform today, or was it today or was it yesterday? I can't remember.
The vote on Medicare for All was yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, so
some of the big platform.
So obviously that was a big debacle, obviously, because there's no Medicare for all on the DNC platform. Almost 80% of Democrats agree that Medicare for all should be something that is implemented in the Democratic Party platform. As a Bernie delegate, like, what's going on the inside as far as like the delegates? What's the kind of chatter? How do you guys feel about that?
People are not happy. I would be lying if I said that it's all hunky dory. The thing that's disappointing is the platform is, it's not a binding resolution. It's not saying we're going to do this no matter what. It's just kind of laying the groundwork, the framework, if you will, for policy that the party and the administration will be taking. And they couldn't even throw the progressives a bone in this non-binding platform policy to say like, oh, well, we might offer a way to eventually lead to Medicare for all or whatever it might be. You have an idea that's popular with about 80% of the party. And you could say the same for legalization of marijuana, incredibly popular with the constituency of the party, but still the delegates didn't think that on the platform committee didn't think it is worth putting in the platform. So I hate to say it, I really do, because in a duopoly you don't really have any other options. But I understand why a lot of young people, or hard to say centrist, but a lot of ultra progressive minded people have completely lost faith in the Democratic Party, because what is the party doing to earn your vote? It's not like the cult of Trump, where anything that he does or says automatically becomes what people support because they support Trump the individual. A lot of progressives, we don't necessarily look at Bernie that way. Bernie could come out and say, like he has said, hey, vote for Joe Biden. It's important. He's right. It is important to get Donald Trump out of the White House, but it's not to say that Donald Trump losing the election will all of a sudden fix all the issues with American society is disingenuous in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of people who kind of think that doing something like that without fixing the underlying issues will just lead to another Trump 4 years, 8 years down the line that may be even worse or maybe competently evil and therefore able to push policy and agenda without saying the quiet stuff out loud and kind of letting people who are watching from the outside realize how much of a circus it really is. So if you're not going to actually allow policies that are popular with your base to become part of the party's platform, you have to understand that people are going to leave the party. It's just the way it is. And I can't for the life of me understand why the party at a national level doesn't seem to recognize this. Now, they are correct in assuming, I saw numbers yesterday, I don't know if it's still accurate, that said right now about 82 to 83% of Bernie supporters are leaning towards or will vote for Joe Biden. So I think the establishment's mindset behind that is, why would we cater to them? They're going to vote for us anyways. You know, they're not going to vote for Donald Trump, obviously. They could vote third party, but I don't think many of them will. The numbers say that they're going to vote for us. We have it in the bag. It's what happens when you take the lesser of two evils mindset and keep pushing it further and further and further every year. You know, the right can take it a couple of steps further, and as long as the left goes with that equally, you know, pushing equally far right as the right does as well, the whole Overton window will shift to match that, and it's kind of where we're getting right now, where you have a lot of national Democrats, I should say a lot of Democrats at the national level that really don't represent progressive ideals in any way, shape, or form. Getting money out of politics would be a great step to dissuade that, but that's a lot easier said than done. The Supreme Court obviously has said that money is free speech, so you're now getting into territory of the First Amendment and what is or is not legally speech, I guess, and not that really hasn't been tested by the administration right now anyways, considering what's going on in Portland and soon in Chicago and potentially Milwaukee and a number of other cities. So it's scary. It really is scary. I don't think if I sat here and told you that I have an answer that was, you know, blatantly obvious and could just give to you, I think a lot more people would come to the same conclusion and we might actually be able to get something done. Progressive policies are necessary if we want to continue advancing as a society, but getting those implemented are a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things, I think we talked about this a little bit in one of our previous calls, is that we've kind of put ourselves in this cycle where we put in one of the most horrible candidates as a Republican candidate. You have a George Bush, you have a Donald Trump, and then we get to this point where basically any blue will do, right? But that has, like you talked about, shifted us to the right. It shifted the Overton window to the point where most Democrats are basically either centrist or you can even make the argument that they're right wing. They just have Democrats behind their name. For example, look at Joe Manchin. But this leads to end the cycle, and then we're saying, well, we have to vote for the lesser of two evils to mitigate the harm. But if we keep doing that, we're going to actually get so far down that rabbit hole that we're basically, well, one can even argue that Joe Biden is a Republican, that we're going to end up, electing a Republican as a Democrat. And one of the most viral things on the left that I guess isn't really talked about amongst liberals is that Obama pretty much admitted to being a 1980s Republican. So This is my problem with the two-party system as it is now, is that we've shifted so far to the right because we're just kind of mitigating and trying to keep things as status quo. But when you're shifting the status quo to the right, then the status quo is eventually just going to be right wing. And that's why I have a problem with, okay, any blue will do. Because at this point, any blue is pretty much a Republican. Obviously, there's not a question there. I'm just kind of talking and just discussing. How do you feel about like that dynamic that we're in an endless cycle of continuously shifting to the right?
I would agree with that completely. There really is no true opposition party in America. A great example today, Mitch McConnell with the next stimulus round, straight up has said a number of times now that without liability protections, it's an automatic no-go, dead on arrival. You know, that they have to have it, or the Senate Republicans will not push it. Well, Steny Hoyer then comes out today and says, I believe it was Steny Hoyer, said, well, the $600, that's not a deal breaker for us. We'd like to see it or whatever, but it's not like not having that will throw us away from the table. And we see that time and time and time again with literally everything. The Republicans will take a hardline stance where they demand X needs to be done, or nothing will get done. The Democrats will cave and say, well, this thing that we had that was really popular, we would like to have it, but we don't have to have it. And then you're coming to the negotiating table already significantly underhanded. Now, if this was a true negotiation that is putting you at a big disadvantage, I don't know the inner workings of Congress as well as, somebody who is there, like a legitimate congressman, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if we were to find out eventually. I don't know how we would find this out again. But that, the backdoor negotiations really aren't head-to-head negotiations like you would think, where the Republicans give and take a little, Democrats give and take a little. I think it's much more likely that the leaders of both parties come to general consensuses that are beneficial for the corporate backers that are funding both of their campaigns, and whatever they say or whatever they best want goes. I mean, there's no excuse whatsoever for the Democrats to not be pushing Medicare for all right now. We're in the middle of a massive pandemic. 40 million people are unemployed. We're looking at millions and millions of evictions in the next couple of weeks if nothing is done about in terms of like a rent moratorium or anything. What better time would it be to push Medicare for all? If it can't get done now, even with the numbers saying that massive percentages of the population support these ideas, I don't think it ever will.
Yep. I mean, the real reason, like you just said, is that it has to do with the corporate donors. I mean, look at what just happened with the military vote. They were only suggesting that we cut 10%. 10%. That is a very small percentage. Even if we cut 10%, it would still be the largest military budget in the world. If you even combine the biggest, by far
the largest.
So a 10% cut is ridiculously small compared to other countries, and that shows you the power of the military-industrial complex and the power of money in politics, which I vehemently am against.
You can't understate media's role in this either.
Yeah.
Think about
because they just go right along with it. I mean, when is the last? Honestly, I can't even remember the last time I seen a report on the Afghanistan war or why we're still in Iraq or what even victory looks like. I mean, it's ridiculous what the media has done. Actually, they're doing a disservice by not covering a lot of these issues.
And there's small little things they do that. For example, when they were talking about the cut to the Pentagon's budget, they simply list the budget as 750 B, so that it's stating 750 billion or whatever. But then when what was it? I think it might have been. God, now I'm going to misspeak. But when they were referring to something else that I believe Bernie Sanders wanted to add to one of these bills, it was 22 billion. But instead of just listing 22 billion. They write it out, 22, 000, 000, to really show how much money 22 billion is.
Exactly.
But really, 22 billion is peanuts compared to 750 billion. Exactly. It's just, if you show it a certain way when you're putting this information out, you can already control the narrative right off the bat of how much money is really being tossed around here. I don't think people understand how much money $750 billion is.
And that's just the money that is accounted for. I mean, let's not forget all the money the Pentagon loses every year. I mean, I think they did an audit for the first time like a year or so ago, and they were just like, dude, we can't account for so much money that goes
Mm-hmm.
into the Pentagon. I mean, like, if you, I think I seen a report that if you add up all the money that they spend a year, it's well over $1 trillion. It's
Probably, and
ridiculous.
that's per year.
Yeah,
That's
per
what's so
year.
wild. Per year, like what we could do from an infrastructure standpoint with that kind of money, it's wild. And then you see, Donald Trump at his press conference today talking about how the military is, the experts on logistics and how logistically they're better than everyone else. That's kind of hilarious when you consider the military is almost famously the bad at management of that kind of stuff, oversight, misplacing large weapons, expensive weapons, large amounts of money, whatever it may be. When you're dealing with money in that massive amount, it can be easy for a couple billion here, a couple billion there to slip through the cracks. And you're talking about money that could be life changing for millions and millions of people. So,
Yeah, and I mean, just staying on topic of the military, I mean, they have so much money and they're producing so many war weapons, vehicles, etc., that they have nowhere to put them, and that's where we get to the topic of policing and the militarization of police because they can't sell enough because we're making too much, and they have to go somewhere. So why
you
not?
got all these excess weapons. What are you going to do
Exactly.
with them? You're going to give them
Exactly.
to your police departments that have government funding anyways. So it's not like they're just using taxpayer dollars to purchase it. It gets funneled right back into the military industrial complex. And now your police forces, the ones who are protecting the capital, let's be honest,
The
these people
capitalists.
do not protect and serve the community. They protect and serve the interests of capital. That's not to say there aren't good cops out there, but I think the system kind of inherently wants bad cops because they're easier to, it's a lot easier to convince an already mean person and a person with already has no sense of empathy. It's a lot easier to tell them to go beat up some moms that are protesting police brutality than it is to tell someone who's got a soul, hey, this isn't the best thing to be doing right now. Then all of a sudden they're questioning, and once they start questioning, I mean, the military hates that too. You don't question your superiors. You follow what you're told. You follow orders, which
Yeah.
I guess you could kind of trace back to American public education in a way. Um, and now, don't get me wrong. I think American public education has, or at least public education teachers, are some of the best people in society. They are national treasures, as Dave Grohl said. Um, your education is the foundation of a successful society. If you want to be strong, as strong as possible going forward, you need to have the youth trained in the best ways to get stuff done, I guess. But what we do is we seem to have a system where the teacher is the authority. They go up to the front of the classroom. They tell you what to do. They tell you what to learn, tell you what to read. You listen to them. You remember it. Um, and then when the test is put back in front of you, you recite it. You put it back down. You are able to take the information that they give you and regurgitate it back, which in a lot of ways is kind of prepping you for, let's say, lower level work, where you're lower level work, according to society, where you are making minimum wage. You come in, your boss tells you to do XYZ, you shut up and you follow instructions and you do it back for them. Now, is that done on purpose? I'm not saying that. I know a lot of excellent teachers who go out of their way day in and day out to try to uh, push their students to be the best student they can be. But I've seen a lot of lapse in critical thought processes where we don't want you thinking outside the box. We want you to be able to, like I just said, regurgitate information. And is that really a true sign of intelligence? Probably not, but it's a true sign of obedience. how good can you listen? How good can you follow orders? How good can you do what we tell you to do and not question it? That's
Exactly.
very valuable for elite, for the people who control society, to have these foot soldiers willing to do whatever they want to perform at the
I
bidding.
find that America is very good at critically thinking against the left. It's like they'll find any type of way to critically think of why we shouldn't have Medicare for all, even though it's not real critical thinking, or critically think on why we should continue the endless military industrial complex and keep bombing countries that didn't attack us. But for some reason, when you question why we have bombed Syria, you're a conspiracy theorist. But that's critical thinking because you're asking why are we bombing this country that didn't attack us? I mean, it doesn't make sense. But
I think
the
there's
military is just
fundamental. Oh, go ahead.
no. Go ahead. I was just gonna say like the military has. Well, we talked about this as well. I mean, the military has basically taken over to the point that you can't question them, you can't defund them, you can't do anything because, like we said, or not we said, but Dwight D. Eisenhower said, uh, well, I'm not going to quote him right, but he basically warned us about the military industrial complex.
Right.
But they've created this system that has made it impossible to decentralize it because there's a military manufacturing site in every state in the United States, and that's not by accident. And that creates jobs, and if people start losing jobs, guess what? People are going to be pissed.
People
So
get
I mean,
angry.
it's by design. I mean, this is not an accident. So that's why you see every politician who comes up and votes on the budget, they're terrified of going against them because they think their job is at risk, and maybe
Yeah.
they're probably scared of if they're going to lose some campaign contributions. It really is. It really is a lose-lose situation if you're in that system.
The attack ads write themselves. Anytime you vote against the military, no matter what it is, Americans have been we've had it so ingrained in us, and this is again on purpose. You know, you look at the DoD, how they started having the flyovers and the national anthems before sporting events, and they paid a lot of money to be able to do this type of things. It's not cheap to have the Blue Angels fly over a stadium like that. It was to try to rally up the patriotism of the nation, to equate patriotism with being a good American, and to be a good American, you have to support the military. So a lot of people, yeah, like you said, a lot of politicians in particular, they're scared to step on the toes of the military because then, they look unpatriotic, they look un-American for not supporting our military, despite the fact that our civilians, the ones who the military is meant to protect, are suffering more and more every single year, sacrificing more and more every single year. We don't seem to care that without civilians, citizens to protect, there's no need for a military. But
Well, the thing I'm worried about is that is there any room to completely have a warless society anymore? Because I mean, Trump, for all his flaws, he's been kind of actively trying to get us out of Afghanistan. And lo and behold, there's this pop up story from the CIA or the intelligence or the intelligence, the intelligence,
agencies,
yeah,
yeah.
the intelligence agencies. I don't know, my brain is blanking. Putin's paying Afghanistan to have bounties on American heads. Look, I want to address everybody who's fallen into that trap. First of all, we've been in their country almost 20 years. Trust me, they don't need an incentive to kill Americans. They want us out of their country whether they're getting paid or not. So the fact that people are falling into that trap, it's going along with, okay, we need to stay there because we're trying to be anti-Putin. But whether we are there or not, Afghanis are going to try to kill Americans because we're occupying their country. So, like, to fall for that story just because it's an anti-Trump story, it just makes it seem like, to me personally, that there's a system set up that anytime you're trying to end war, anytime you're trying to defund the military, there's going to be something that comes out, whether it's a story, whether it's some type of attack that comes out of nowhere. Like, I think they were talking about getting out of Syria or something, and then lo and behold, a Syrian gas attack comes out of nowhere. And that's actually been debunked by the actually been debunked that the Syrian government didn't do that gas attack. So I mean, it's just too convenient. So I always wonder, is it even space to even have these conversations, because people fall into this trap so much. Because
Mm-hmm.
as you said, people are not taught to critically think, and a lot of people don't critically ask the right questions.
Oh, Americans hate thinking. We
Mm-hmm.
love just being able to. I've noticed this with the older generations in particular. People that grew up with, you turn on the evening news, Walter Cronkite tells you the news how it is. You listen to him and then you interpret it themselves. They'll have some kind of argument like that. Well, these people have now been trained their entire lives to sit in front of the television, be told what the news is, be told what to think about it, and then that's now their mindset on it.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be very dangerous when implemented with specific agendas in mind, as we're seeing with Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC do it as well. That you get, somebody who watches nothing but Fox News and somebody who watches nothing but CNN have two completely different mindsets of what the world looks like right now. And it's likely that neither of those mindsets are accurate. Now, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure there are certain aspects of it that are accurate, obviously, but they have this worldview that everything that goes on outside of America, first and foremost, doesn't matter because American exceptionalism. We're number one in everything, and who cares? Go America, whatever. Freedom, my freedom is more important than anything else. And actually, I think that's one of the biggest issues that modern society has today in regards to the COVID outbreak. You look at the entire world that has done a much better job than us of containing COVID. They listened to scientists and doctors, they wore their masks, they socially distanced, and they paid people to stay home. Now, the United States obviously is not going to do this because we don't really care about our people. We care about our corporations and our wealthy elite. So we didn't do any of those things. The numbers have ballooned. They're skyrocketed out of control. A lot of Americans think that because we're the freest country in the world, my freedom supersedes the collective health of society. So even if they do understand the dangers of COVID and understand the importance of wearing a mask and all that, they purposely won't, as a kind of FU to the system, because they don't like being told what to do, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they might know that what they're doing is wrong, but hey, you're not going to tell me how to live my life. I'm American. I have the freedom to do whatever I want, because they don't care about society as a whole. They care about themselves and their personal freedoms. So it's kind of, in a way, perfect that Donald Trump is our president, because I think he represents every single negative stereotype about the American population perfectly. I mean, he's loud, he's obnoxious, he's incredibly fake. I mean, spray tan every day.
He's
The
the
John
American
Bolton,
id. That's
right?
what he
John Bolton
is.
talking about how he needs an hour and a half to get his hair ready every day. He cares more about his
Jesus.
ratings than anything else because he's literally a reality television show. He's a walking reality television show. And I hear a lot of people, particularly on the right, talking about how the rest of the world is laughing at us because of Obama or whatever. And it's it's kind of it's both hilarious and incredibly sad at the same time that the world is laughing at us, but it's not because of Obama. It's because you elect a clown, you're going to get a circus. And for a country that thinks that we're the greatest in every way, shape, or form, to have so many massive, glaring flaws and still have the audacity to think that we're vastly superior to everyone simply by being born in America is the disconnect from reality. It's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. I just don't understand how we're going to fix this with such a large percent of the population completely lost, frankly.
Well, first, like you said, I mean, we have to really do something about how our media structure is set up. I mean, after the Telecommunications Act and the consolidation the media conglomerates, I mean, they're owned by very few companies. I think it's what, like 6 people own
It's
all
5 or 6 companies,
like
on
own
like
all the
90%
media
of national
companies
media.
in America. I mean, once you have that, of course, there's going to be very specific agendas pushed, and there's going to be huge segments of the populations who attach to that. And you can say a lot about the 1960s, 70s, and whatever you want. I mean, they're no bastion of how we should frame our society, but the media wasn't completely owned to one party. I mean, that explains why, Nixon was nearly impeached, because there wasn't a whole media structure behind him. I mean, if there was a Fox News in the 1960s, I do not believe that it would have got to the point where Nixon was almost impeached.
I believe Fox was literally created so that would never happen
Exactly.
again. Like, I'm fairly certain that's why they made Fox originally, was to have a network to protect their side.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the problem. If we have whole networks dedicated to one party or another, then you're never really going to have this true conversation about how you change the minds of people, and that goes for the left as well. I mean, MSNBC people will buy onto propaganda as well. I mean, look at Rachel Maddow. She did hundreds of stories on Russiagate, and then that kind of went nowhere. And then she told people that Russia could turn off their lights in the middle of the winter. Like, come on now. I mean, it's really sad to see, but I think we do have to decentralize and break up these big media conglomerates if we want to see any change in how people think. Because, I try to kind of take in a number of media just to kind of see what other people are talking about, even if I disagree with it, just to see like, oh, okay, well, maybe this person made a good point here, but I don't fully agree with you. Like, I think I watched. Have you ever watched like the Joe Rogan podcast?
I have, and I'm not a huge fan of Joe Rogan personally.
Like, whether you're a fan or not is not really the point. But the point that I'm making is that, like, what's nice about his show is that he'll bring on people that I won't traditionally listen to.
That disagree with, yeah.
So it brings me out of my bubble so I can listen to some of the points people who I don't agree with make. And at the end of the day, I might overall disagree with them, but I can see that, okay, you have some points that I could disagree with you or agree with you on, and we could possibly have a conversation on how to create a better society. But once you have a media set up like Fox News, where it's only only certain and specific voices that agree with you are going to get on the show, then people don't have that open-minded of discussion to open their mind to see that there are people who are actually logical. Because from the right, liberals are crazy and they just want to tax the hell out of you, and from the left, there's this perspective that all Republicans are racist and they don't believe in caring for other people. So I mean, but that's not necessarily true if you actually speak to some of these people or hear them talk. It's a lot more nuanced than that. But I think that just has a huge problem with the conglomeration of media. But I think YouTube is a huge remedy for that, and we can see that with our generation that we're a lot more open minded. But there are some cancel culture. There is some cancel culture. I'm not gonna deny that. But I mean, overall, I think we have more flexibility to kind of reach out to other people's opinions because we do have the internet. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the world is not black and white. There's, it's on a spectrum. Everything is on a spectrum. It's not Star Wars where, well, and see, and I shouldn't even say Star Wars, where in theory the Jedi are the good guys and the Sith are the evil guys. If you really dig into some
Jedi
of the,
are pretty bad.
Right, there's a lot of bad stuff that the Jedi have done too. Exactly. And so nothing is ever as simple as good versus evil. A lot of people that have, like when Bernie Sanders pointed out Cuba's literacy rate, he was not saying that Cuba's this great, awesome, amazing country that everybody should. He was saying they did a good job of teaching people how to read. You can do good things while not necessarily being good overall, and you can do bad things while still being a good person. I'm sure there are there's infinite examples
Exactly.
that could be
I
pointed
mean,
out of people
I
who fit
mean,
into
I
that
was
range.
I was reading not too long ago that back in Iraq, I mean, no doubt about it, Saddam was a pretty bad guy overall. But they before we like invaded and destroyed the country, people had free college. I mean, and that's a good thing. Not saying that this person who was a dictator was a good guy, but that is something that we don't have. So are we by definition horrible because we don't have free college? I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know. It's just life, like
America
you
has
said,
a
is not
massive
black white.
sex trafficking problem. Does that make us a terrible country? You know,
Exactly.
the argument could be made that yes, it does. Sex trafficking is a very big issue. Um,
You guys have sex trafficking, so maybe somebody should overthrow your
mhm.
government. That's
Well,
basically.
what sketches how many high-level government people are affiliated with known sex traffickers, and that goes to both sides of the aisle. I mean, Noam Chomsky said that there is no left and right wing party in America. There's the party of the corporations and the party of the people, but the party of the people, or it's something like that. Basically, corporations versus the people. They're two wings of the same bird, two
Hmm.
faces of the same coin type concept. I like to look at it kind of like I think the Democrats are kind of like diet Republican. They're Republican light, if you will,
Yeah.
where do they understand at least optically that a large percentage of the population will revolt if you come out and straight up say incredibly racist, incredibly misogynistic, incredibly offensive stuff. But they're still implementing the same policies behind closed doors. I mean, Pelosi has had a number of opportunities to push back on some of the budget proposals that Trump has made, and nothing has come of that. A lot of it is just symbolic gestures that are meant to appease the angry progressives or radicals or whatever they would call us. The kente cloth thing, for example,
Oh yeah.
what does that accomplish in the slightest? It's just a photo op, and then these same people will turn around and chastise Donald Trump for his photo op at the church, which they are correct. It was worse. He was gassing protesters to get them out of the way so he could hold a Bible upside down. But if the only argument you have for what you did was that, well, what they did is worse, then why should I support you? I want to support stuff that's going to help people. I want to support positive policies. I hear so many right-leaning people that complain about mainstream media by saying like, well, where's the positive stories? I'm so sick of seeing all this negative stuff. We've known for 100 years, if it bleeds, it leads. More people are more interested in negative stories that catches their attention. These media corporations, they're not beholden to the people who are watching. They're beholden to the money, to the advertisers, to the,
Hmm.
they're a business too. Their goal
That's
is to make money.
that's why they're covering Kanye West.
Yeah, because people love a train wreck. And
Exactly.
kind of ironically, I think that's why Donald Trump was elected. He got so much free airtime in 2016 because of how outlandish and ridiculous he was.
He was making the money.
Plastered him everywhere. I mean, if I'm CNN or MSNBC, I would rather have a Donald Trump presidency than a Bernie Sanders presidency, because they know that he does a great job of protecting the corporate liberals, because there's always a worse boogeyman to point at. They can do whatever they want, and they can hide behind the fact that, well, Orange Man is bad, he's worse. It kind of covers all of their misdeeds. It covers the fact that they just voted like 82% to 18% against Medicare for all, despite 82% of the population approximately preferring that. So if I'm, the Democratic establishment, if I'm the Democratic elites, I think that they purposely put so much effort into crushing the Sanders campaign, not because they thought he would lose to Trump, but because they knew he would win.
Yeah.
And for them, a Biden presidency obviously is better, but a Trump presidency even is better than a Sanders presidency, because these people are still the very upper echelon of society. They are still incredibly rich. They're incredibly wealthy. They have nothing to worry about like us peasants do. They just want to keep the status quo, like you said earlier. And the status quo just isn't good enough. It's just not. We as a nation have so many core issues going back years and years and years that re-implementing the status quo like some of these ultra Biden Democrats seem to think will make all of our problems go away is just not going to happen. I think a lot of people that support that mindset want the status quo back because obviously it benefited them. Maybe they're upper middle class white suburbia. They don't see any of these issues. They know that they exist, but out of sight, out of mind. You know, if I don't have to think about it, or I don't have to see protesters on the news or while I'm driving to work, then they don't exist. And it's a lot easier for people to just kind of push that all off to the side and not think about it than it is to come to the realization that our system is inherently flawed. So
you know what's interesting is that we have a lot of protesting going on. We have a lot of activism going on in the age of Trump. But I'm wondering if Joe Biden gets elected, is the left going to go to sleep? Because under Obama, it's fairly reasonable to say that the left fell asleep.
we did have some protests.
And that's why we did. But I'm talking about on the mass scale, because we have pretty mass scale protests and activism going on right now. But like I said, a lot of it went to sleep.
What do we also have right now, though, that makes it a lot easier for mass protests and people to get out in the streets and
we do have a lot of
fight for what they believe in.
Stuff going on. So I mean,
well, I was going to say unemployment. A lot of people aren't working right now, and the American system of beforehand, the status quo system, you need to keep your job or you lose your health insurance. No health insurance, your kids can't go to the doctor. The job is kind of the foundation of society. Your life revolves around your job, which, first of all, I think is not a healthy way for a society to still be living in 2020. In the grand scheme of things, we're just, sentient water bags floating on a giant rock through space. Why can't we just be nice to each other and try to enjoy our life instead of having to spend the best years of your life making a profit for somebody way up the tier on you? You're missing your children's birthdays, missing baseball games, missing whatever it might be, missing dance recitals because you have to work. Because if you don't work, you lose your job. You can't put food on the table. Mm-hmm. So now, because people are able to get out in the streets and protest, it's not like the old days where you take one day off to protest, you're fired, your life is over. Now we have the ability to go out and make our voices heard because we have nothing else to lose. We're already unemployed. Mm-hmm. We're living in the middle of a pandemic. I say we as in the population. Yeah. A lot of people are going to be struggling to pay their rent, are going to be struggling to put food on the table. At this point, what do you have to lose? And I don't understand why the wealthy don't recognize that. After, I believe it was Lenin who said, every society is only 3 meals away from chaos. Once people are legitimately start starving and, they have literally nothing else to fight for, it's going to hit the fan. Yeah. And I don't see anything that the government seems to be doing to prevent that right now.
Well, you just quoted Lenin, so now you're a communist. So everything you just said doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about just randomly is, okay, we have a society based on, pretty much endless consumption, and we're always told you need to make X, Y, and Z amount of money if you want to have X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like, do you think money or money buys happiness or money equals happiness?
Well, I don't want to say who did it because I'm going to be wrong. And then, anybody who disagrees with this point will immediately say, well, that point's invalid. But there was a study done a couple years ago that I believe said that happiness does go up with money, but only to a certain point, which I believe was about $70,000. Mm-hmm. So your happiness money did coincide with happiness up until the point where you were able to afford all of your necessities to live a basic, comfortable life. So you don't have to be filthy rich to be happy. You just have to be able to afford all of what you need to live what would be deemed a
comfortable life.
A comfortable lifestyle, right? You have a home. You don't have to worry about, maybe the car breaks down. you can comfortably afford to have it repaired without having to worry about if you're going to eat next week. You can afford to pay for your child to join the sport league that they want to play, to join the dance team, to do whatever they want to do. You don't have to worry about choosing between, does my kid get fundamental enrichment, or does he get supper? So yeah, there is a point where money and happiness go together, but you think about $75,000, like, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that much money. Like, and see, I guess I shouldn't say that either, because for such a massive percentage of the population, that is an absurd amount of money. But then for a very small percentage of the population, that's not even worth bending down and picking up if you found it on the street. You know, Jeff Bezos would be wasting his time bending down and picking up $75,000, because whatever he's doing otherwise is making him even more money than that.
Yeah.
So if we really want, American society we could be on the verge of some kind of 1980s utopia where everybody doesn't necessarily have to work because of automation, but they get a universal income, so they're still out spending money, they're still out stimulating the economy. I mean, a child could tell you, how do you get an economy going? You have to have money circulating. How do you have money circulating? You give it to the people who will spend it, which are the people on the bottom who need to spend it. The ultra rich are not going to do anything with that extra amount of money except stuff it in some foreign bank account, or, throw it towards some politician to get another benefit for their company that'll just make them more and more and more and more money. If you give money to the people at the bottom of the pyramid, they will go out and spend the money, thus the money will circulate. I mean, anybody that's watched a human pyramid knows you don't put the 5'2" cheerleader at the base. You put the 6'3" football player on the bottom and stack people up on top. You need to have a strong base for any pyramid to function. And right now, America is, the line of the 5'2" cheerleaders with a couple of 6'5", 350-pound gluttons sitting up top, just inhaling every dollar that they can get their hand on. And at some point, the cheerleaders aren't going to be able to hold that up. Even if they want to, they are going to be physically incapable of holding that much weight up. The system will collapse on itself. And, Donald Trump wants to talk about anarchists and anarchy in Portland when he's tear gassing groups of moms and veterans. That's not anarchy or anarchists. If he wants to see that, keep going at this rate. Evict 40 million people. Keep 40 million people homeless. You will see anarchy, and it will not be pretty. I don't mean that as a threat, because I'm not looking forward to that either. It's going to be disastrous. It's going to be incredibly destructive.
Well, the thing is, it's like a backfire effect as far as that. Like, if you're doing oppressive governmental thing, it's historically known that it's going to bring more people out.
Yep, exactly.
Like,
and we've seen that in Portland. Now that the feds have invaded, more and more people are coming out every single night to protest. These people that have been born with silver spoons so far up their rear ends that they just can't comprehend what life is like to not have money. And, I don't want to act like I'm coming from poverty. We were middle class. I went to a good school system. Why do I get that benefit simply by virtue of being born white and middle class, but somebody else, just by being born, black and in the city, doesn't get those same amenities that I got? How many Albert Einsteins have gone to waste sitting, dropping out of high school because they had to go work at McDonald's to be able to pay so that their brothers and sisters can eat, or whatever it may be? And that's not even starting to get into the war on drugs. And so many white people will sit around and joke about, well, where's the black dads if they had a dad? Well, maybe if you weren't arresting them for very minor drug offenses and throwing them in jail for 25 years, they'd be around. It's so incredibly racist to just assume that something like that is by skin color versus the true cause, which is poverty. And AOC comes out and equates crimes to poverty, which frankly is a no-brainer. People who don't have money have to do whatever they can to make money. If your options are working 60 hours a week at McDonald's to barely afford rent and barely afford food, or go sling drugs on the corner for I don't know, 4 hours a day, and all of a sudden you're making 10 times that. Like, it's a no-brainer. It's a risk reward. Humans judge everything by a risk reward system. Yes, the risk is very high, but the reward is so immense that you have to take that opportunity.
It's worth it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't. Well, the thing that a lot of people tend to ignore in that aspect is like, well, if you just do everything the right way, then you'll magically be on top. There are so many people who've done things the right way and they're completely just beaten down by society. I mean, look at my brother is a pure example of that. He went to college with me as well. He went to Whitewater. And I mean, just little things can add up. Like he had a ticket, and that ticket ballooned because he couldn't really afford it. We were in college,
can't
not
afford
that
to
much
pay
money.
it.
And then he gets more tickets on top of that. And then next thing you know, his driver's license is suspended. And then it's harder for him to get a job.
How are you going to get to work? How are you going to have a job if you can't drive?
Exactly. And then he has a son. And then he starts to make his way up a little bit. He's paying down his tickets. And then, boom, his house burns down. He has to start completely over. So when you hit rock bottom like that, a person, when they're not getting the best job opportunities because you're not be able to work certain jobs because you don't have a driver's license, because if you start driving and you get pulled over, it's just going to get worse for you. You start asking, okay, what are my options? What can I do? I have to feed my son. I have to pay my rent. I have to buy a new car and then pay down my tickets. I mean, like when you start adding into a lot of these factors, you start understanding why people have to make certain choices to get by. It's not just like, oh, just follow the law and follow the system and everything will be okay. Well, that's in a perfect world, yes. But we live in a very imperfect world. I mean, most people can't even afford a $400 emergency. I mean, that's just baffling. I think it's what, over 50% of the country, 70% of the country?
Something like that.
And we're told that if you just work hard enough, everything will be okay. That's just not true. That's just not
I think
true.
a great example of that is musicians. There are a lot of incredibly talented musicians out there. But in order to actually make it big, you need to have a lot of luck. You need to be recognized by somebody in the industry who can push your profile. You need to get lucky to have a video go viral or something. There are millions of incredibly talented musicians that will never amount to rock stars because they're just not getting lucky. Same with actors and actresses. Professions like that where you kind of need to catch that big break. You look at Amazon, people want to talk to, Jeff Bezos grabbing himself by the bootstraps and pulling himself up. Jeff Bezos was an incredible student. Do not get me wrong. His academic record is one of the most impressive I've ever seen. But let's not forget when he, made his company out of his garage, that he received a decent loan from his parents at one point that, you, for example, if you're starting a company,
$1 million.
Can't do. Donald Trump gets a small loan of $1 million. I'm not going to my parents and getting a small loan of $1 million, and that's coming from a white middle class family. Imagine what a poor black family is doing in the inner city if you ask them to casually give you $1 million like that. And with the example for your brother with the house burning down, I know people who would say, well, you should have had insurance. Not understanding that insurance is not free. You have to sometimes make decisions on what you're going to do if you only have X amount of money. Am I going to pay for insurance this week, or am I going to feed my son? Now, obviously, feed the son is always going to be the example I'll take because that's the more extreme one that people will recognize. But there are other options. Am I going to – my son's birthday comes up this week, and he has had his eye on this – maybe it's only even like a $50 toy, but $50 when you really don't have extra money to spare is not cheap. So what do I do this month? Am I going to pay for the insurance that I might not need if nothing goes wrong, or am I going to let my kid have a nice birthday because he doesn't get to experience very much? I want my child to have a good life. I'm going to get him this toy. Well, then I get incredibly unlucky and my house burns down. I don't have insurance. And so many people just want to act like, well, I have the money, so why don't you? It's little, like you said, it's the little things that the system does that is why, when we refer to systemic oppression, the little things that add up.
Well, to add context into this, I bet a lot of the middle class people who are losing their jobs right now, who are forced to get on unemployment, I bet they're not saying, oh, it's my fault. and I need to pull myself up by my bootstraps. No, they're saying the economy is tanking, the government is failing, and X, Y, and Z happen, and
Coronavirus
I
took
need
my job.
help.
It's not my
So
fault.
what do you expect me to do? I mean, how come? I think what's very weird is that people see things from a context from a different lens. It's like, oh, okay, if that person has to go on some type of welfare program, oh, it's just their failures.
Yeah.
They,
If a
they
black
did something
person's
wrong
on
in their
welfare,
life.
they're mooching on the system. If a white person is on
Exactly. But if
welfare,
I
they just got
failed,
unlucky. They're
it's
down on
not.
their luck.
Yeah, exactly. It's not my fault, but it's something crazy that happened, and hey, I need some help. But I mean, it's just that's. I think that's why conversations like this are very important because it brings up different perspectives on how other people live, and like we stated before, the world isn't black or white. I mean, I can guarantee you, every person that I've known on some type of social safety net, they want it to work because after like maybe a month or two, honestly, people get bored. I
And
mean,
it's degrading.
yeah, it's degrading.
You're you
People
might
get
not feel like
bored.
you're mooching off the system, but you kind of, that's what the system is created for. How can you mooch off a system that's doing what it's supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer in a society is only as strong as its weakest link. If you don't protect those at the bottom, how can those at the top act like there's anything, that you can't act like you're the king of the free world, of the greatest country on the planet, when you have millions of homeless people unable to eat every night, when you have children starving, being trafficked by the very elite that are supposed to be quote unquote protecting them. Like,
Well, I think people also view it in an awkward way. They see it as like, okay, that tax money is gone and I'm never going to see it again. But they don't realize that inadvertently they're actually probably getting funded by that money once or twice over. So, for example, if a person gets food stamps, right, they're going to go to the store and buy food and fund who's ever working at the grocery store, maybe the manager, maybe the supervisor, the grocery bagger, the district manager. It goes up
mhm.
the chain. But if you give a tax cut to a millionaire, that goes nowhere. But if you give some tax incentives or help to a poor person, that goes up the food chain.
It's what we were talking
And
about before with
yeah,
UBI, right? Poor people
exactly.
have to spend their money because they don't have money. So
Exactly.
you
So
need
it's
necessities. You need to be able
like
to live. You need to survive.
exactly, and I feel like people, if they view it like, okay, yeah, I'm getting taxed, but is it and eventually going to get come back to me? Because eventually it does, because poor people are going to spend their money on business anyway. Then you stop seeing it as it's just a burden on my pocket. And don't get me wrong, there is some taxes that are kind of stupid in America. When I've looked at like tax systems of like Switzerland, it's way less complex. Like in America, we have all these different tax codes and systems of how
That's done on
it's
purpose. Actually,
yeah,
that was
it's
done by
ridiculous.
TurboTax and one of the is did Intuit buy TurboTax? It
Yeah,
was
into
a
it, I
couple of the
believe that
couple of the big tax companies lobbied to make tax code as complex as possible because that's their business model. If taxes
mm,
are easy to do, everybody just does their taxes by themselves at home. Now TurboTax doesn't have a company anymore because nobody's going to give them any money to do that.
Jesus.
And I think Switzerland's a nice example of why we need to be able to get people to understand the value of that taxes have on a society instead of looking at it as just money out of my pocket. So, for example, let's say you live in somewhere in Europe, I live in America. We both make the equivalent of 10 US dollars per year. I'm only getting taxed two of those dollars. So I keep $8, right? But I have to spend $1 on insurance, both health insurance, car insurance, whatever it might be. I spend $1 on education, sending my kid to college, XYZ, whatever it might be. And I spend $1 on child care, sending my younger child to be taken care of while I'm at work because I, can't be home. I have to be able to put food on the table. So somebody's got to watch my kid. So I've now spent $5 out of my $10. I only have $5 left. You, living in Europe, get taxed $4. So you only have $6 to begin with instead of 8. However, you don't have to pay for health insurance. You don't have to pay for childcare. You don't have to pay for education. You're not having any of those out-of-pocket costs. So the $4 you paid in taxes is all you pay. You now are keeping $6. I'm only keeping 5. So despite the fact that you pay double what I pay in taxes, you still end up with more money because the system is providing you other things that your tax dollars are paying for. I mean, conceptually, America already is kind of socialist. Our highway systems, paid for with, everybody's dollars. The $500 billion government bailout that we just gave to our large corporations, that was paid with tax dollars. There are a lot of things that our tax dollars go towards. Oh, now my voice is cracking too. I gotta simmer down over here. I get passionate about this kind of stuff. I'm passionate about equality. There's a lot of things that our tax dollars already go towards that in a lot of ways benefit the wealthy. I mean, MLK's got that famous quote, socialism for the rich, rugged individualism for the poor, right? Welcome to America. That's how we do it. Elon Musk is on Twitter the other day. He's going to block me now because he hears about somebody talking about him and all of a sudden.
Badge of honor.
Yeah. But he was on Twitter the other day talking about how, the left is losing the middle and stimulus packages are bad. He received millions and millions of dollars himself as part of the government aid program. He is by no means a centrist. He is an ultra incredibly rich right winger. I mean, a lot of his policies might not be right wing, but I think by virtue of
it's probably more of a libertarian.
And you can look at a lot of the campaigns that he donates for. He's donated for a lot more right-leaning campaigns than left-leaning. But that makes sense because, wealthy people want to protect their money. I hear a lot of people argue over what's the purpose of voting. Do you vote for what helps you the most as an individual, or do you vote for what you believe helps society the most? And I think there's very good arguments for both of those sides. But I think when you try to intertwine them is when you have issues. So hypothetically, if every single person in America voted for the policies that helped them the best as an individual, policies would get implemented that are good for the majority of the population, which therefore is good. By virtue of everybody being selfish, everybody coming together as selfish gets the largest percentage of people getting what benefits them the most. If you vote for what you think helps society the most, you would still, in theory, end up voting for those same things because it helps the most amount of people, therefore helps society the most. Though I know a lot of wealthy people don't really look at it that way. They genuinely think that helping the wealthy helps society because, the wealthy are job creators and whatever other terms they like to throw out. It's conception versus reality can be a very, very tight rope. On paper, trickle-down economics makes sense. Sure, you put resources into the top, those resources funnel down step by step, but humans are inherently selfish, we're inherently greedy, we're inherently narcissistic. Though the rich are not going to allow resources to trickle down, they're going to hoard those resources because that's what they do, and that's how they got rich in the first place, which is why you need to start from the bottom and work up, because that also makes sense on paper, but can be actually proven in its it can be applied, and we can watch it in its application work by seeing these poor people that are given money going out and spending money, thus if there's a lot of political theory that I hear from a lot of people where on paper, sure, it sounds great, but you're assuming that people are going to do what they should, which a lot of people just don't.
Exactly. A lot of things sound good on paper until you actually implement them, like taxation is theft.
You have to have taxation. Who's going to take care of the roads? You think Jeff Bezos is going to, out of the kindness of his heart, go fix up all the roads in your neighborhood?
He probably doesn't even drive. He probably has like a helicopter that takes him everywhere, or some type of hovercraft. I mean, this dude is filthy rich.
When you have that kind of money, I ran a couple numbers the other day. Listen to this. So, let's say you are an immortal and you just finished building the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. So, this is about 4,600 years ago. You decide you want to save some money for the future. You also happen to be filthy rich with American dollars. So, just play along with the hypothetical. Obviously, a lot of it doesn't work out. So from the time of the pyramids, you, this incredibly wealthy immortal, decide to save $100,000 every single day. Now, 4,600 years later, you have about $169 billion in liquid assets. Jeff Bezos' net worth right now, and obviously this is not liquid, but his net worth is like 190 billion from what I saw recently. But when I ran the numbers, it was about 172 billion. This was about a week or two ago that I ran the numbers, which means after saving $100,000 every single day for 4,600 years, you would still have $3.5 billion less, which is the entire net worth of New Orleans Saints and New Orleans Pelicans owner Gayle Benson, less than Jeff Bezos has right now. That's what, when you're talking in these billions of dollars, you know, Gayle Benson would be considered extraordinarily rich by any single standard of any country on the planet. $3 billion is more money than you could ever spend in your lifetime. And yet, that is the difference between her, or between Jeff Bezos, and this hypothetical person who saved $100,000 every single day for 4,600 years.
Jesus.
Just absurd amounts of money we're talking here. That if you tax these people, if you implement some kind of marginal tax rate on them.
If we tax that dude 70%, he'll still be filthy rich.
If we tax that dude 99%, he would be filthy rich. But a lot of conservatives, I have one relative in particular who just could not conceptually understand marginal tax rate. He was saying how AOC is coming to take 70% of your money. Why would you vote for her if she's going to take 70% of your money? And I had to explain numerous times how tax brackets work. You only pay that percent as you reach a certain amount of money. So let's say we have a 90% tax rate on income north of $10 million. Your first $10 million is not getting taxed at 90%. It's every $1 over $10 million that gets taxed at 90%. But conceptually, he just couldn't grasp that. He thought we would just be taking your entire fortune, taking 90% of it. And then, well, why would anybody want to do that? Because that's not what we're doing. Obviously, if AOC wanted to take 70% of all of our money, we wouldn't support that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the right is about figures. They're about, you know, they have their politicians, their leaders. They look at the leader as inherently superior versus progressives who look at the ideals as inherently superior. If Bernie Sanders came out tomorrow and was vehemently opposed to Medicare for all, legalization of marijuana, started taking Donald Trump's platform, and that was his new shtick, I would hate Bernie Sanders because we'll have to start talking about getting the guillotine out for old Bernie. Right, exactly, because we love him for his ideals and his actions. Granted, he has stood for the right side of actions for the last 40 years, so this hypothetical where he flips all of a sudden is not, you know, super likely. But we don't worship Bernie as a demigod because of who he is. We worship him because of what he says and what he does.
Well, that's the thing, because if you look at the right, I mean, generally speaking, well, not necessarily generally speaking as the right, but Trump supporters, generally speaking, support him no matter what, almost. And they think that Bernie supporters are exactly like Trump supporters, and we're not. We don't see him as some type of cult leader or some type of macho man. He's the leader of the party. No, he has got our attention because he said, okay, these are the policies that I would like to implement, and we followed the policies. Like you said, we're not a cult following, and that's why a lot of liberal media doesn't understand why, you know, only 3% of Bernie supporters have donated to Joe Biden. It's because Joe Biden isn't leading on the policy.
He hasn't done anything that we respect. Exactly. You need to earn our vote. You're not going to get our vote simply by virtue of not being Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Now,
that's a low ball.
To be fair, I'm not going to fault anyone who votes for Joe Biden simply because he's not Donald Trump. I have heard the argument for electing Donald Trump. This is the only argument pro-Trump that I can moderately understand, is that, you know, Joe Biden is a continuation of the issues that we've had in the past. Electing him does nothing to actually fix the structural problems we have. Well, 4 more years of Donald Trump, he is so abhorred and such a disaster for both the United States and the world at large that by re-electing him, we hasten the coming revolution. You know, he's so bad that it kind of makes the revolution have to happen versus Biden, who could potentially quell it for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and then push these issues further down the line. And I'm not going to disagree with that. I think if you believe that the American system is unfixable, it's inherently corrupt, and nothing that anybody does and says can change it, then you would vote for Donald Trump because he is the fastest way to cause a complete restructure.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of blood. There's going to be a lot of people that are hurt. There's going to be a lot of people that this harms massively. But if your mindset is that's the price you pay for revolution, I believe Thomas Jefferson said the tree of liberty must be satiated with the blood of patriots and tyrants every now and then. It's something along those lines, basically, that said, if you want to continue having freedom, sometimes patriots and fascists are going to butt heads. So if you're a believer of that camp, that it's going to suck either way, but we might as well get it over with, then maybe you would go with Donald Trump. With that being said, if Donald Trump comes out tomorrow and has a plan that's it pushes the Green New Deal, pushes legalization of marijuana, pushes Medicare for all, pushes ranked choice voting, he's going to win in a landslide. There's going to be a lot of progressives who will say, okay, well, why do I owe the Democrats my vote if Donald Trump is going to give me what I want? Now, Donald Trump's a famous liar in every way, shape, and form, so believing he will actually implement these policies is a completely different question.
That's a huge
completely different question. But let's say he at least runs on those ideas. I think enough of the progressive anti-establishment base would support him that he would probably win handedly.
I mean, he hasn't done really much policy, but he did come out and sign that executive order to import drugs from Canada.
He was raving about that today.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing. It's like Joe Biden could easily come out and say something like that, but he just let Trump outleft him. Now, I'm not saying it's going to lose him the election, because right now the polls are showing that Biden is in a pretty comfortable lead. But if Trump keeps doing that, he might start actually chipping away at that lead. And granted, he definitely will have to stop sending in feds everywhere. That's definitely not helping his polls. Mm-hmm. But this, in my opinion, this election is not set in stone yet. I think some people already think it's in the bag because Joe Biden has some good poll numbers. But we see from the primary election that an election can flip easily. I mean,
and if you play the numbers right, you could win a presidential election with something like 20. I want to say 22, but I think it's higher than that. Somebody ran the numbers on the absolute minimum amount of votes you would need to win the presidential election as long as you got them in the key swing states, and it was something absurd, like 22% of the population. Jeez. So let's say hypothetically that the Department of Justice goes out of their way to make it as difficult as possible for people to vote in communities of color, in poor communities, in college communities, and then makes mail-in voting nearly impossible as well, which during a pandemic, might hurt the conservative base more, considering how many, how old their base is. But let's say he implements some of these heavy-handed suppression tactics on top of massive super PAC dark money going towards ads and, Facebook pushing other Russian propaganda and whatever that happened in 2016 that swayed the vote immensely in a couple of key swing states, plus active suppression. And he could easily win this election again, even if the vast majority of the population supported Joe Biden. And frankly, it's pathetic that this election is not, 100-1. Any candidate that was not terrible should wipe the floor with Donald Trump. But the Democrats wanted to nominate the only politician in America that potentially has more skeletons in their closet than Hillary Clinton. Like the absolute only person that you could say, this guy's an establishment, neo-lib going back 40 years. He was friends with Strom Thurmond. He literally pushed the crime bill. Like, this guy is the absolute worst candidate you could pick. And the Democrats were like, let's do it. Here we go.
That's our guy.
Go get him, Biden.
But the thing that's very different about 2016 is that Trump has completely abandoned his 2016 strategy. In 2016, it was, go hard on corruption, go hard on trade, go
I'm
hard
the
on the
outsider.
economy.
I'm going to clean
Yeah,
the
I'm gonna
swamp,
count.
drain the swamp.
Now
Yeah.
it's Mr. Law and Order, Mr. Statues, Mr. Polling, Mr. Cognitive Test. Like, why are you going on Fox News talking about your cognitive test? Like, come on, dude. Nobody cares.
Oh, because
Nobody
he's the most
cares.
narcissistic person on the planet.
Yeah, but his strategy is completely, is BS. I mean, that is the huge problem. Why I don't know if he can dig himself out this hole. Maybe if he switches his strategy, also some policy proposals, and maybe it'll actually be an election. But if he goes on this continual strategy talking about things that people really don't care about, I mean, maybe his base does because they, for some reason, care about
They eat up anything
Confederate.
he does and says.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for some reason they care about Confederate statues, but I mean, Joe Biden, he literally doesn't have to do anything. He can just sit in his basement the rest
He
of the
shouldn't
election.
do anything.
He doesn't have
He
to.
shouldn't.
He has
If
no
I'm
incentive to go out there and do anything. He doesn't
right,
even have to. At this point, he doesn't even have to show up to debates.
I wouldn't. I would say either produce your tax returns or I'm not debating you.
Exactly.
The debates will do nothing but give Trump a chance to. And Trump clearly has significant cognitive decline as well.
Yeah.
On top of the fact that he's kind of famously a moron. People around him have said that. His old teachers of his at Wharton said that. Like Rex Tillerson literally said he's a moron.
Yeah.
So the only way I think he could claw it back is if he manages to show that Biden is even more flailing cognitively. And the only place that that's really going to happen would be the debate stage. I think you made a great point earlier when you said that Trump supporters see the Bernie supporters as a cult because that's what they are. I agree with that 100%. The right, in a lot of ways, I think a lot of the ways that they behave is predicated on the fact that they assume the left is thinking the same thing, which is why a lot of the stuff that they do and say seems to be projection. Donald Trump says, oh, they're hacking mail-in ballots. And then it gets revealed that a Nebraska GOP senator was literally committing voter fraud. Or in North Carolina, the gerrymandering situation. And, it's always the right who's proclaiming the left did this. Now, that's on purpose. I believe it was Trump's old lawyer, Roy, what was his name? He was the guy that was the lawyer for Joseph McCarthy as well. Roy Cohn said that anything that you're doing, just blame it on the other side because you control the narrative right away. And, you're making that the first impression. If anything you do, just blame them. And he's taken that to heart. The right does that because they assume the left looks at the world the same way they do. They think that we look at everything as an us versus them, how the right is our enemy, and how how those people would, they'd cut off their own nose just to spite their face. Mm-hmm. They would eat a bowl of feces if a liberal had to smell their breath type deal. I think they assume that the left is the same way, that we would do stuff to purposely hurt ourselves as long as we would stick it to them. And the left just is not like that. We are mentally, these are two completely different groups of people. The right is authoritarian leaning. They want to have a strong system in place where the leader tells you what to do and everybody down the pegs follows. It's why Ted Cruz is still has Donald Trump's, boot down his throat, despite the fact that he implied that Ted's father had something to do with the JFK assassination, called his wife ugly, any number of things that any man with dignity would be like, okay, nope, I'm not standing up for this guy, but Ted Cruz still does because that's the Republican Party. Mm. They believe in authoritarianism. They want a big, strong leader where everybody follows the line, hook, line, and sinker. It's like I told you the other day that I think the greatest strength and biggest flaw of the Republicans is that they are in complete lockstep from the lowliest bottom peg intern to the president of the United States. They are always going to say and do the same things and spit whatever somebody above them wants, versus the left, which is such a massive party now because the Overton window getting pushed so far to the right. Joe Biden and AOC are considered the same party. AOC has pointed out that that's ridiculous. Their ideologies are so different that it's remarkable to consider them the same party. This gives you a block of a number of different people who have vastly different views. You have people who are incredibly far to the left. You have people who are frankly right of center, but call themselves a D so that they can, sleep at night and not be associated with the evil Republicans, and everybody in between. So the left has a lot more different ideologies that they have to kind of cater to versus the right, which has become incredibly concentrated as the window pushes further and further right. Those who are still to the right of the window are more concentrated ideals.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you do the standard deviation graph, where you get 2 standard deviations out, all of a sudden you're at like 99% of the population. That 1% would be incredibly similar because they're at the tippy top of the spectrum. I think that's what politics has kind of become now. The standard deviation of the center is, already maybe a half standard deviation over. So anybody to the right of that is already very concentrated in their ideals versus the left, which already has people farther left of that, people somewhat left of that. I'm not great at explaining this, but in my head, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, the thing to kind of touch on that a little bit is that we don't really know. I think most people would say this, and I don't think this is necessarily an attack. We don't really know what the Democrats stand for. I mean, for example, you can see what's going on with the coronavirus, bailout bills. I mean, they're not really standing for anything in those bills, and the things that they do somewhat tepidly stand for, they pretty much placate on them really quick, or they say, for example, you brought up Steny Hoyer earlier today that pretty much said, "Oh, we're not set in stone on the $600." And then on healthcare, you can say, "Oh, we're for the party of healthcare," but even with that being said, the profits of the insurance industry isn't going to change, and 45,000 people per year are going to die continuously with this same healthcare system. And then we have Joe Biden coming out and saying that he's not for legalization of marijuana when we know historically that minorities are disproportionately hurt when it's not legalized. So you have to wonder, okay, you're trying to pretend to be the party of the minority party, of the workers' party, while also placating and catering to the wealthy elite. You can't play both sides, and that's why you have this identity crisis with the Democrats. Now, I want to make a huge distinction between just voters and actually the elected officials, because there is a huge difference. I do believe the majority of the voters have pretty good intentions, but they naturally vote for people who don't. And that's mainly because they're going to vote for somebody who they know because of name recognition.
Or it's the system. In the duopoly, you either vote for the Democrat or you vote for the guy who's even...
Or maybe that's the problem.
Outlandishly evil, yeah.
But
like cartoony.
It creates this issue that, somebody who is a liberal might try to vote shame me, say, hey, you have to vote for Joe Biden because it's going to help you. But if I explain this to them that he's not going to help me, their immediate reaction is going to be, well, would you rather have Joe Biden or Donald Trump? And that's a simplistic way of thinking about it. My issue is not Joe Biden or Donald Trump. My issue is, how can we get better candidates? How can we get candidates that actually work for us? And to keep settling for these type of candidates is doing not only the country a disservice, but the service to people like me who you say you care about. People go out and say they wear their Black Lives Matter t-shirts, and they wear their kente cloths, and they'll make hashtag Black Lives Matters in their Twitter bios, but you'll immediately vote for a neoliberal who has antithetical views to anything that I believe in, though that will help people like me. So it's just I think people need to understand this, because I'm not necessarily attacking the Democrats. I'm just saying what exactly happens when we continuously put in these figures who are, establishment, who are status quo. It's not necessarily helping anybody. And you can say, oh, well, we can mitigate the harm. But you got to understand, mitigating the harm is still harming my community.
That's the big
It's
point.
like we need to do way more than mitigate the harm. We need to fix the harm. And I can tell you right now, there's nothing in Joe Biden's platform or the DNC platform that is going to fix the harm or help the harm of communities that are disproportionately hurt through poverty, through drugs, through all these issues. And I think people have a reactionary like this happens on social media all the time. I can't tell you how many times that I've run into it, that when I'm trying to explain something to somebody, to tell them what is going on, why I have a hard time just blindly voting for somebody, they automatically say, would you rather have the worst? And
Exactly.
if that's the end of the discussion, then we're never going to get anywhere, because that's where the discussion ends. Because if you say yes, it's like, okay, well, you want worse. But if you say no, then you still want worse.
If your only point for your candidate is that, well, he's not the other guy, then you're putting forward a bad candidate. That's
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how to make that any more simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
That progressives want candidates that will implement change. And I think most of the people who are arguing what you just said are arguing in bad faith. Though a lot of times it's those that are comfortable with the status quo who say that kind of stuff because, they might be they're upper middle class white suburbia. They're not worried about any of these problems. They just want people to shut up so they can go back to watching Desperate Housewives on Monday and not have to think about all the poor black families that are suffering under XYZ's presidency. They just don't want to think about that. They don't want Trump on the news talking about it every day because it makes them angry having to see how ridiculous he is. But they don't want to have to think about all the problems that communities of color have either, because that makes them sad. So it's kind of pathetic, frankly. But I've noticed this a lot with I have nothing negative to say about any local Democrat that I have worked with in any way, shape, or form. Local Democrats always seem to be great. They want to push progressive policies. They want to do what's best for their community. Even if they're not quote unquote progressives, they have a lot of ideas that would still benefit the community. I think the issue with the DNC comes 100% from the top. Mm-hmm. The leaders of the party, you could almost argue it's like a controlled opposition party now. They stay just nice enough to keep the people placated so they won't revolt, but also side enough with the Republicans where they can always point to the bad guy boogeyman and say they had to, well, we had to accept this because it wouldn't get any better. This was the best offer we were going to get. Well, no, you didn't even really try to negotiate it. You just took whatever they would offer because you like that as well, because the same donors are benefiting you that are benefiting them. Really, America's an oligarchy run by the corporations and the extremely rich. And if that doesn't change in the very, very near future, at some point, people are going to have had enough. And I can't say I'm looking forward to that day because it's going to be ugly, but I think it's going to probably be necessary if we want to reclaim our status as the leader of the free world. Right now, we are a laughingstock.
Well, I think that's why an organization like OWR is super important, because we want to transform that way of politics that is traditionally held. We don't want just the person who has the most name recognition. We want the person who has a policy platform, who's going to fight for the people. I mean, it's a hard thing to do because obviously, when you're in that bubble, people really buy into it and they believe that, any blue will actually do. But once you take a step back, and maybe somebody who is in that any blue will do camp will actually listen to this and actually understand that any blue won't do for everyone. And that's what we have to understand.
Well, think of it like a gear.
Yeah.
Every time you vote for the lesser of two evils, the gear shifts one more click over. Then the next Republican shifts it one more click over. But the lesser of two evils is kind of like the block in place, so the gear can't shift back in the other direction.
Exactly.
So the left is never getting their policies pushed back to counter the ever-expanding authority of the right-wing propaganda machine. They just keep clicking farther. And with the corporate Democrats as the block to prevent anything going back, we're just going to eventually slide further and further into this fascist dystopia that we seem to be facing right now.
That's an amazing analogy. That's probably the best way to say it. And what I'm afraid of is that gear is going to break off and it's just going to keep spinning out of control.
And it's going to, yep.
And then next thing you know, it's just like, okay, what reality are we in? It's going to be like Flashpoint. I don't know, but I think we are doing some good work here with OWR. We've already endorsed like I think like 17 candidates, and all those candidates are progressive people who want to see those things changed. And I think you're right about that. Majority of local Democrats are a lot better than national Democrats because, first of all, I don't see a lot of big corporations swooping in and buy off a local Democrat.
It's hard to buy off millions of local Democrats.
Exactly. So
you only need to buy off the tippy top of the opposition party, and you control the opposition party. They don't even have to worry about the Republicans because they're just going to march in lockstep with whatever their leaders tell them to do anyways.
But the only thing that I do worry about is because, like, I've had interactions with some local Democrats, and I think they have pretty good intentions, but I think it does sometimes fall fatal to groupthink, in which, okay, if you think outside of what we're thinking and you try to tell us we're wrong in some matter, there is a little bit of opposition and vitriol that comes your way. And I don't know. I think that happens with all groups because they don't like to change.
Humans are creatures of repetition. Yeah, we love it.
Exactly. And I think
love routine.
Like policy-wise, local Democrats aren't that bad, but as far as like groupthink and kind of being in this kind of this group bubble, it does fall subject to some of the things that we've talked about today. Hey, you're on the outside, you have no right to give your opinion. But I mean, I think like with people like us, I think our generation is going to be the most progressive generation ever. So we're getting better, and I think we're electing more and more progressives because more and more progressives are standing up and saying, hey, I can do this. But it's just going to take a long time, and that's the point that I'm a little bit worried about this time, because I think we are inevitably be running out because obviously climate change and things like that. So I don't know. It's worrisome, but I am also optimistic. So it's a weird dynamic to be in right now.
I wanted to look it up to make sure I got the quote right, but I wasn't able to find it. It's from a pretty well-known Republican thinker. I'm gonna blank on who it was, but he said conservatism is based on two basic principles: that there's an in-group which the law protects but does not bind, and an out-group which the law binds but does not protect. And I think that is a perfect encapsulation of what we see with America, the in-group. And the in-group isn't even being white. The in-group is money, which is why, people who compare race to crime, it has nothing to do with that. Crime comes directly from poverty, just like being part of the in-group is having money. If you have enough money, you can get away with anything. If you don't have enough money, you can't get away with anything. There are I guarantee there are hundreds of thousands of impoverished minorities sitting in jail right now for minuscule behavior that any person with any amount of $50 maybe is their bail, but they can't afford it, so they're just sitting in jail. Versus the Walton daughter who killed someone drunk driving, and you're never even going to hear about it because they're filthy rich.
I think, and to just piggyback off that one more time, I think a lot of people don't understand this or think about it, but if I've lived in both very poverty-stricken neighborhoods and very, kind of middle-class neighborhoods, and one thing I can say is I've lived in like a middle-class black neighborhood before, and I can tell you it's extremely different. A lot of people try to say, oh, it's a cultural thing, that's why they crime. No. If they have money, if they have opportunities, it's going to be a lot different. Trust me, I've seen it. I've seen it because they have, they have money. They don't have to go out and do things that aren't,
And that's the illegal. Same reason. That's the same reason that you'll hear, snobby, wealthy white kids, whose dad is a Goldman Sachs banker or something that, so he was literally born sliding into home plate and then has the audacity to tell other people to grab themselves up by their bootstraps. But you'll hear from those type of people a lot. Well, I have a black friend. My one black friend, my one black friend, Andre, and he doesn't act like that. He's not a gangbanger. Well, let's think about the circumstances that you live in. You live in an incredibly wealthy neighborhood. You go to an incredibly expensive private school. the fact that Andre is also at this incredibly expensive private school and also in this incredibly wealthy neighborhood implies that Andre has money. So the reason that he's one of the good ones, as you like to say, it has nothing to do with it's how do I phrase this? They use those terms interchangeably as like a kind of like a dog whistle to explain to themselves why race is the issue instead of money. They'll say, well, Andre's one of the good ones. He doesn't behave like that. Andre has money. Andre has opportunities. Andre has resources just like you do because you are all wealthy. Versus, I don't know, Jamal in the next town over who does not have those opportunities, is not, and let's say Andre and Jamal are cousins even. Like, let's say they're related in some way, shape, or form. Andre will take his wealthy white friends to meet his cousin Jamal. If they were to ever do that, they would learn that Jamal's a cool dude too. He just doesn't have the same opportunities and same money that you have. But they would never understand that race isn't the divider in that. They would just think, oh, he's also one of the good ones. And I think that's just such a dangerous sentiment to have when you're not looking at the actual reasons behind why this behavior can be different. Like, impoverished white communities have incredibly high crime rates too. When people say black on black crime, that is one of the most disingenuous arguments in existence. Yes, statistically, more black people are murdered by other black people, but statistically, like 90-something% of murders happen to people within communities. You're not going out and murdering random people. That's what white serial killers do, but that's not what most people that are killing someone is. They're killing them for a reason. They had a fight. They had a disagreement over a girl, over money, over whatever it might be. They had a vendetta with this person, thus they killed him. Yes, they are in the same community because, systemic racism, and you look at Milwaukee in particular, how segregated of a city it is. It makes people of the same race live together. So when they're committing crimes, it's against other people of the same race. It's the same reason the white on white murder crime is incredibly high, because you're murdering people in your community, people that you are affiliated with, people that you know, and people of the same race tend to live together because of segregation and other systemic issues that America was kind of born on. And
it's
that's
not like
what
they're just gonna wake up and be like, hey, I should drive to Germantown and I should kill somebody.
I should just go kill one of those white people in Germantown. Like, people don't think that way. That doesn't exist. I saw people on our neighborhood app. I think I was telling you this story the other day. When there was a couple protests that were going on in Milwaukee that were organized, and they were literally saying on this neighborhood app, like, hey, do we need to get ready to defend ourselves? Everybody get your guns ready. Well, I don't have guns. Okay, get wasp killer. You can spray it at them and it's poisonous. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, A, you people are sadistic as hell. That's disgusting. And B, do you really think the protesters want to, like, come out here? Like, you people are the boogeyman in their closet. Poor people who have seen how this system works want nothing to do with you privileged asshole white people, because you are the bad guys in this situation. They're sitting there looking at all these poor people like, oh, they're criminals. They're going to come up and break into our houses and steal from us and, and rape people and all that stuff. Like, dude, these people don't want to be around you just as much as you don't want to be around them. How can you not understand that? They're not going to come out here and bully you just for the sake of, like, it's almost like they think that they think kind of like the right and left thing that we were talking about before, that because that's what they are thinking, they assume other people are thinking that as well. Mm-hmm. When at their core, people have fundamentally want different things from society. A lot of progressives fundamentally want society to be the best that it can be for everybody involved, versus a lot of the authoritarians who have this mental merit system where they think if you're at the top of society, you're filthy rich because you earned it. You worked hard to get it. They don't think about any of the circumstances behind it, like someone like Donald Trump, who is filthy rich because his father owned a real estate empire in New York. Does that mean he earned it? Well, according to Mary Trump, Donald's family thinks they earned it genetically. They think that they're rich because they're genetically superior. By kind of definition, that is racism at its finest, right? Like, that's
pretty much.
Thinking that you are genetically superior to other people is racism. And he thinks that because he's wealthy, he's genetically superior. A lot of authoritarians believe that money is the merit that decides your worth to society, because as a society, we completely revolve around money. You could be the smartest man on the planet. If you're not wealthy, you don't have merit to these people, because money is what they justify as self-worth.
Yep, exactly. I mean, look at Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, Tesla's a great example.
Perfect
Yeah.
example. But yeah, I mean, is there anything you want to say before we end the little podcast discussion?
I'd like to tell more young people that it's okay to be involved, to make your voices heard, and I'd like to tell young white people in particular that have had opportunities that other children may not have grown up with, that recognize that you recognize that your situation, you were pretty lucky. You were born with your parents are in the picture because your father, when he was arrested with a small amount of marijuana in his 20s, he was not thrown in jail like somebody else's father might have been. He got off with a warning and a ticket. So you now have your father for your entire life, when something as minuscule as a tiny possession of a plant stole a man from his family for 20 years. And now this white child might be making fun of this black child for not having a father, not understanding the systems in place that prevented this father from being able to grow up with his son. I want these white people that have lived this kind of life of privilege to recognize that white privilege exists, but it's not, don't look at it like people aren't attacking you for your white privilege. It's not a bad thing from your individual perspective that you got lucky and you are able to experience white privilege. Do not take that as an insult to someone telling you you didn't work as hard, or we're not saying that. What we're saying is the color of your skin was not an additional hurdle that you had to pass in your life. Your life could have been incredibly hard, but one of the things making it hard was not the color of your skin. That's what we're saying white privilege is. And if more people were able to recognize just these little things, you don't have to worry about getting pulled. You get pulled over for speeding. Oh, whatever. I'm just going to get a ticket and go home. You're not worried that you're going to get shot for reaching for your driver's license, that this might be the last time you get to ever see your family. Those kind of things don't cross your mind. That exists, and that is white privilege. There's a number of ways that white privilege exists. Do not think that that black people are telling you to feel guilty about it, like, oh, I hate myself, my white privilege sucks, I shouldn't deserve to be happy. They're not saying that. They're simply saying that we want you to recognize that we didn't get these benefits, and we want everybody to be equal. I can't stand when white people have the all lives matter dog whistle saying that, oh, black people want to matter more than white people. No, dude. They understand blue lives matter. When somebody says, well, all jobs matter, they'll say, yeah, but all jobs aren't under attack right now, only blue lives are. So they clearly understand the concept, they just don't want to expand it to reach everybody that doesn't include themselves and their small social bubble. And I think that's gross. It doesn't fit their narrative. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I think that's gross. So, I want white people in, middle class suburbs to know as well that you might not see it. You might see a lot of Trump signs. You might hear a lot of racist stuff when you're standing around the cooler, making jokes, making cracks, whatever. I'm not telling you that you have to be inflammatory. Well, I would love for someone to say, like, come on, guys, this is inappropriate. I understand that you need a job too, and if you were to fight back against this racism, especially if it's your boss or whatever, you might get fired, and now you can't afford to put food on the table. I'm just saying that if everybody could at least recognize these issues exist and try their best to push ways to improve it for everybody, then that would be awesome. Well, I would love you to say, like, come on, boss, that's racist. I'm not telling you that you need to put your own livelihood at risk. I'm just telling you that allies exist in your communities, and if you can find them, you can work together to push these narratives that benefit everybody rather than just a select few.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we're definitely we definitely had a good number of talks, and I'm guaranteeing in the future we're gonna have a lot more.
We'll have a lot more
And,
for sure.
We definitely both are gonna be fighting for progressive policy for the foreseeable future, at least until I can't anymore. But yeah, everybody. Well, I don't know if you got like a social media that you want to shout out or anything. Or...
I mean, you can find me everywhere at Facebook is just William Walter, but Will Walter 93 with 1 L. You'll find me anywhere that I have an account with that. That's the go-to.
All right, OWR members and viewers, if y'all want to go check out Will, go hit him up on social media. There you go.
Hit me up. I'm always open to chat. I love meeting new people, and anybody who's got ideas about how we could team up with OWR. I appreciate that, Andre. Thank you. I wish we had known each other in Whitewater. I feel like we would have had to see each other at some point, or like.
I think we probably did, if it wasn't some type of random party or
intramurals at the least, or something.
Through a lunchroom or something. I don't know. It had to be. It's just you interact with so many people in college. It's hard to remember everybody.
And that's a small town like Whitewater. Now imagine a nation like the United States, and you can see why it's so hard to get everybody under one umbrella.
I think it says the average person will interact with maybe 10,000 people in their lives, and they'll only remember like 1% of them. So, I mean, you're now in that top 1%. Look at you, you filthy rich bastard.
Yeah. Well, 10,000 people compared to the population of the United States,
Exactly.
Like, absolutely nothing.
Imagine being the president and shaking millions of hands. Like, dude, I remember you.
These numbers add up quick. That's why people need to understand this with money.
Exactly.
No one person needs $1 billion, let alone 10 billion, let alone 100 billion.
Exactly.
So.
Well, hashtag billionaires from the U.S. But we'll end it on there.
Sounds good, Andre. You take it easy. It's always nice chatting with you. I'm sure we'll talk soon. And OWR is doing great work. We got to keep it up.
Yeah.
We got to fight for what we believe in, because if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Not Donald Trump.
not Donald Trump, that's for sure.
All right, everybody. Everybody have a good night, and we'll catch you guys later.
Take it easy, everybody. Have a good night.
We always say the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave,